Hey, Michael Verney is with us. Michael, good morning to you. How are you?
Gents, how are you?
Yeah. This is a remarkable story, even by the multitude of remarkable stories that we have got over the years. It's an All-Ireland Final. It's not like, this isn't a run-of-the-mill Leinster Championship match between two Division 3 or Division 4 sides that ultimately is a little bit of a storm in a teacup. But this is kind of brings together so many of the different aspects of GAA life. It's a tiny, tiny little parish town against the might of Kilmacud Crokes. And the GAA have not intervened for whatever reason. What's your understanding of why the CCCC didn't intervene? Were they not allowed to?
Like a governing body not being allowed to intervene or make a statement. I think that's fairly fanciful to think that they couldn't make a statement on it. I find it absolutely unbelievable that they've just, they've hopped the ball almost between Glen and Kilmacud now and basically abdicated all responsibility. I find it bemusing, really. And now it's left to, like you're talking about, Kilmacud potentially making a statement, and the Glen have made a statement last night and are going to make, some sort of a judgment or a ruling, or they're going to make a decision in the next couple of days. But take that away from the clubs. Take that responsibility away from the clubs. Make a decision yourselves. Say that there's been a 16 player on the pitch and that you're going to make a decision, be it replay, be it forfeit, be it fine, and take the responsibility away from Kilmacud Crokes. Kilmacud Crokes are almost been, painted as the villains in the piece now. But to me, there were 16 players on the pitch, but it's very, very simple and very, very basic. It happens in underage games. It happens in, college games, Fitzgibbon games. Player comes in, player comes off. And I'm talking about games where there's no fourth official, where there's no referees, coordinators and this type of thing at the game. Player comes in, player comes off. Player comes in, does not come in until the player comes off. There's no way in an All-Ireland Club Final that something like this should have been allowed to happen by the GAA first and foremost. I don't even know, does Darren Mullen know that he's been substituted? It's the last minute of an All-Ireland Club Final. The last thing he's thinking about is whether I'm coming off the field or not. The only thing he's thinking of is whether I can have an impact in this final play. And basically, the play should be stopped until Darren Mullen exits the pitch, the middle of the pitch, and then player comes in. And to me, this is a problem that the GAA have created. It's not a problem that Glen have created, and it's not a problem that Kilmacud Crokes have created.
We approached the GAA press office yesterday, Mick, and the response I was getting was essentially that because it's all still very much up in the air, they have a limit on what they can say, and clearly nothing they could say at that point. That was their argument. But it strikes me that the silence is screaming now. The GAA need to come out and say something.
Yeah, I can't believe they haven't said. The first thing that I only saw the games back on Monday morning because I was working elsewhere on Sunday, and the first thing that's coming into my head here is, are the GAA going to admit any wrongdoing in this? To me, I personally do not think Kilmacud Crokes have done anything wrong or intentionally done anything wrong.
I'm not sure, right? Because they are. There is a quote from in various papers about how they were trying to kill the clock at the end. At the end of the game, you're trying to kill the clock, and that would imply, and that's attributed to the manager. That would imply some sense of knowing that you're taking your time to get off the field, and it's actually their job to know if they have 15 men on the field as much as it is the official. So I don't think they're blameless in this, but I understand your point of view, and we can toss that up. Certainly the main culprit is the GAA's organisation in saying, okay, if Malachy O'Rourke is on the sideline saying, hang on, there's 16 men on the pitch, we get to take that 45 again. If they'd taken the 45 again, everybody would have gone, no big deal, game over, whatever happens, happens. Maybe they score a famous last minute goal and Kilmacud are broken again, I don't know. Maybe they don't, maybe it goes wide, who knows, right? But I do think that Kilmacud have some blame in this, and that's why I'm saying they should come out and say, and be the leaders in all this. Are they? Where's their leadership?
Hold on, Roger. The leaders in this are the GAA.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't think the onus is on Kilmacud to say anything. It's not been smart as well. Kilmacud, who have just won an All-Ireland Club title and are, I'm sure, absolutely, celebrating the bejesus out of it the last 24 hours or whatever it is. Obviously, there's a bit of I wouldn't say there's a stain on it now, but there's a distinct likelihood that if Glen appeal, that a replay will be made. But I don't think the onus should be left on Glen to make that decision. And again, that probably comes down to, I don't know, is that an emotive decision or is that a ruthless decision to say? Is it an emotive decision to say, listen, we had a chance at the end, the extra player on the pitch didn't in our eyes have any impact on the play, we lost the game fair and square? Or is that a ruthless decision to say, Kilmacud had 16 players on the pitch, we're appealing and we're probably going to get a replay? So a lot will come down to the individuals involved here as well and the feelings that they have on it. If it's someone that's very cold and calculated, they might be like, no, they broke the rules, we're looking for a replay. If it's someone who's like more emotive and wants to take their beating, as is always said in the GAA, they will probably not appeal and they will not get a replay. Yeah.
I mean, I would tend to agree that with Colm Key's piece today in your paper, that a replay would safeguard against the future abuse of the rule. We've Damian Cassidy on the line with us this morning as well, an All-Ireland winner in his time with Derry. Damian, we just wanted to get a sense of what Derry people think about this. Good morning to you, how are you?
Not too bad, thanks very much. Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. So quick after the game, there was that typical GA thing where the best team won, leave it on the field and all of that type of stuff. But I think over the past 36 hours now, really, we're talking about or slightly more. The shift is changing to. I think it's changing to a position where people realise now that Glen have a very legitimate case. I think it's clear cut. The 17 players, Mannion situation, I think is very simple. It was a really technical thing and he wasn't involved in the play, but the extra player definitely had an impact on the resulting play that occurred. And I think there's a shift moving towards where Glen should possibly consider taking that appeal.
I know we're saying, Damien, the onus shouldn't be on Glen in the first place to have to make this decision, but say this was Balahi, say it was your Balahi team and the exact same thing had happened. Would you be protesting this result?
Well, interestingly, I had a conversation with a Glen, prominent Glen club member yesterday, and I suppose as I said earlier on, I shifted, and. It's not very often you get to an All-Ireland final. And there's Glen. We would have a good history ourselves in the terms of the competition, and yet we've only appeared in 2 finals. And once in a lifetime group of players come along. That club was putting massive emphasis on underage coaching. They came from an intermediate position at the senior for quite a while, and just last year they won their first club title in the history of the club. So these opportunities only come along once in a lifetime. They literally are once in a lifetime opportunities, and they have a legitimate position to challenge that due to the incompetence of the GAA. And my view is, whenever you get to something like that at that stage, you just have to grab it with both hands and hang on for pure life. So my view will be, I think we'll be appealing it. Now, the interesting comment that was made by that official was, we appeal it, and then we'll make a decision about whether we replay it or not.
Right, because they're fairly confident they're going to win, and whether or not they... here's the thing, right? That would be terrible, I think, because I think that they should replay. I think everybody thinks a replay would be fair at this stage on both teams, given that Kilmacud were winning the game. But I definitely agree with you, Damien. I think there's a difference here. If Kilmacud had used an extra sub, right, and it had been 7 subs instead of 6, people might be able to think, okay, well, that's an administrative error, and that's probably the responsibility of the linesman, and then it becomes a bit of a grey area and you leave that on the field of play. But this is an extra man. This isn't just like a mistake was made. Like you have an extra man on the field of play at a key play. Literally the opportunity for Kilmacud to have the same heartbreak that they've had. We saw in the semi-final the exact same thing happen, where the ball is floating in under the crossbar and it requires somebody to save it. I think it's too meaningful to let go.
Yeah, look, and I seen the Ulster Club game with Niamh Connell and Cargan, and Cargan got a goal literally in the last 10 seconds of the game, to force a draw, and then they won the game in extra time. And an extra player in that box in that congested space changes the whole entire dynamic of what can happen. And that's exactly what happened. Regardless of the length of time, that's irrelevant. The play's still there, the opportunity's still there, and if space is denied and to the advantage of the opposition, that's a clear breach in my view.
Damien, I don't want people to think I have a tinfoil hat on saying this, because I don't, but the phrase anti-northern bias comes up quite often when it comes to the GAA. If this was the other way around, if this had been Kilmacud that had the 60, or the Glen that had the 16 men on the pitch, do you think it would have been resolved quicker and more ruthlessly?
It's a hard one to know, to be honest with you. It really is a hard one to know. The one thing I suppose that you can say is that we do have a wee bit of a history of shooting ourselves in the foot, and this is an opportunity that they had to make it nice and clean, take away the controversy, be in control of the association and outcomes, and that's their responsibility to do that. And I just think it's so crummy to pass it back to Glen. I genuinely do. I just think it's absolutely just not a right thing. As an employer, whenever you have things going on in your workplace, it's clear cut. You have the responsibility of the employer to deal with it. You can't bury your head in the sand and hope it will go away. Generally, it escalates and becomes a big problem, and this is now what we're seeing.
Just on Damien's point there, it's so watery, such a watery non-reaction from the GAA in an organisation where we teach people to take responsibility both on and off the pitch for their lives, for their play, for their skills, for strength and conditioning, for everything else. And the GAA look to have completely abdicated responsibility now and just thrown the ball over to Glen. Yeah, it doesn't smell nice to me at all.
It speaks to an absence of leadership, really, Michael, doesn't it?
Yeah, you'd have to say it, because they could have just come out Monday morning with some sort of a statement and said that the CCC are currently launching an investigation into the events in Croke Park yesterday, and we will make a decision in due course. Well,
the GAA are quite quick to make decisions when it comes to money, and Joe Bradley was making the point on the show last night that if this was Dublin Mayo 2017 and this had happened, there's 82,500 reasons why the replay would have been called straight away, and that's you can't argue with that. I mean,
that's right.
If they were filling Croke Park, this would have been decided straight away.
Yeah, and it's a real thumb in the face of the biggest day in the club calendar as well. Because as you say, if it had been an All-Ireland Senior Final, I'm sure there would have been something out yesterday morning, maybe even Sunday evening. Maybe even the 45 would have been retaken, such as the gravity of the situation. But to me, there's a lot of things I didn't like about Sunday. I didn't like the state of the pitch for an All-Ireland Club Final. I didn't like the fact that how did they realise that Darragh Mullen had to come off after the 45? How did they not know beforehand? This isn't like a college's game where there's consternation on the sideline and there's lads going everywhere and lads running on and off. This is an All-Ireland Club Final with so many officials involved, the cream of the crop, and it's amazing to think that we've allowed this to happen. And as Damien says, we seem to miraculously find a way to shoot ourselves in the foot at different chances when the opportunity arises, and we've done so again. Yeah,
Damien, that transformation in viewpoint that you talked about when you just joined us, about how we leave everything on the field because the best team won, and that was Malachy O'Rourke's immediate post-match reaction. What do you think was the catalyst for change in the Glen officials? Do you think so? And I suppose the corollary to that is it your understanding then that you think they probably will appeal?
Well, I'm not going to turn around and say what I think Glen are going to do. I have been talking to one prominent person, and that was prior to the invite to come into the show. The change probably is that none of this is Glen or Kilmacud's fault. It's I think the moral argument has been is starting to recede, and I think it's a situation of things been done right and done fair is starting to overtake the situation. And as I said already, that particular person said, my view is, and he would carry a bit of weight, is that we take the appeal and then we make the decision themselves about whether we'll play the replay or not if we're awarded it. And that was very interesting, I thought, on his part to say that.
Damien, what's your take on people who are coming out and making the, frankly, in my opinion, bizarre argument that the final play was just one play? It was only 15-20 seconds, didn't have a massive impact. Someone being on the line. Like you were a wing half forward in that great Derry team in '93, and with Balahi as well. In fact, you played Kilmacud yourself in the All-Ireland Senior Club football final in '95. Just as a forward, as someone involved in those moves, just how impactful could it be having an extra player involved and an extra defensive player on the line?
Well, apart from playing, I've been involved in management for quite a while now, and I've seen so many games. Genuinely, I've seen so many games won in the last 5 and 10 seconds of the game, and people saying that, I don't think they fully appreciate the chaos. I mean, the games and as managers and coaches, and we try to control as many outcomes as we can, and there's a lot more structures come into the game that has allowed you to try and control what's going to potentially happen in terms of your plays. But there's periods in games where it's absolute chaos and nobody has any control. And what we had in that last period of the game was chaos. And Kilmacud's were, they were all over the place. They were just defending for their lives, and that opportunity was there for Glen to take something out of the game. And when a space is congested as that, you put one more player into it, it changes the entire dynamic of what potentially could happen. And, every outcome creates a different outcome. And that's just the natural way of things. So that's what's happened there. Mullen was on the line. That made that space more congested. There might have been somebody else who would have dropped into his position, which would have created another space in front of the 6-yard box. Those are things that will never be answered.
Yeah.
And as I said already, from my experience in playing and managing quite a while, that I've seen so many games in the last 5 and 6, 10, 8, 15 seconds, won or lost. I referenced Carrigan and Eve Connell and Ulster Club this season. Nothing was impossible, and nothing is until the final whistle, and that opportunity was taken away.
Yeah, the All-Ireland Club hurling final last year, it's not like there's loads of precedent for last-minute goals beating teams who are trying to defend the lead. Damien, I know you got to go in just a moment here. Just on that point about then we'll decide if we offer a replay or not. Like the rule initially used to be very clear. As soon as you breach, if you have an extra man on the field of play, you get kicked out, you forfeit. There was no wiggle room. So the rule changed to allow some wiggle room. And I guess if the GAA had stepped in and said we're dictating a replay, then there wouldn't have been any kind of sense of offering. It would have been like, whereas now all of a sudden, if there is an appeal, then it's up to Glen to decide what happens.
Yeah, and that's well, I suppose if there isn't, it is up to Glen. It's just, I just think it's rotten. I just genuinely do. It should have nothing. This point in time should have nothing to do with Glen, because they did nothing wrong. And Kilmacud, in fairness to them, what's happened has been a mess. As you already referenced, the official is making a mess of it. So it just doesn't sit right. And I think the history books will be there, and people will move on in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, 9 years, 10, whatever. But Glen will be left with this legacy of a mess and one of the biggest days of that club's generation. So,
is it too late for somebody to step in and say, right, we've just decided we're going to fix this. There's going to be a replay, lads? Because if they allow the appeal to come through, that could be an absolute disaster. Because Glen might decide, you forfeit the game, we win it, and away we go.
Well, that's what they're going to do. I mean, at this stage, they've dug themselves a hole, and they're not going to stop digging. They're just going to let it run and leave the ball at Glen's court. Make no mistake about it.
Right. That I hadn't even considered that scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, Damien, we'll let you go. Thanks a million.
Not at all. Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's Damian Cassidy there, of course, an All-Ireland winner in his time, Balahi clubman. I guess that's the view from Derry. Michael, what do you make of that? Because I definitely hadn't thought of that scenario where, the rules. I don't know. Maybe the CCC just take the appeal and decide that it's going to be a replay, and it's up to them then.
Well, I hope the ball isn't thrown back into Glen's court in that case, where it's going to, there's a potential for them to actually win the fixture and win the All-Ireland. When I'm sure that's not what they want. I'm sure they just want, they want to replay the game. I'm sure they just love to even have that last playback, let alone play the game again, have that last playback against with just 15 men on the line. And that would have been smart. The ball was very close to going into the corner.
Just needed a flick.
And there's a rule of, it's like unintended consequences. It's not a coincidence that the ball went to that side, because there was probably an overload on the other side of the goal, partly due to the extra man, if you get me.
Yeah.
So like, that's why I'm sure there was a tactical reason why the ball was floated in towards that side and not the other side, because there was an overload on the other side, due in part to the extra man. But I saw someone tweeting, if this is going to be a replay to this game, that 13 years later, Louth are finally going to get their day back, and they're going to replay the famous Leinster final. And again, like, that leaves such a sour taste amongst Louth people and amongst the rest of the country. And again, the onus was probably put on Meath at the time, and Meath came out as the bad guys in it. Whereas, like, the GA should have made a call on that as well. Yeah. And like, if we haven't learned from that, you think we would have learned by now. And you asked, Ger, is it too late for somebody to come up, put their hands up and make a call? No way is it too late. It's not even 48 hours since the game was fixed to be played, so of course it's not. Get
Thierry Henry out of retirement as well, I think. Play Ireland, France, all over.
Who's going to do that? Is it the president? Is it who is it? Is it the director general? Like some,
it's probably a combination of people: the president, director general, chair of the CCC. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's
anyone.
You've seen, like, lads, calls, like, look at how quickly the split season was made, and even the COVID championship was made. Things can be done very quickly when they have to be done, and you know what I mean. There's not as much red tape as is made out when you actually have to go and make a call quite swiftly, and your hand is forced.
So just to outline, the nightmare scenario might be here, where Glen issue an appeal. We all know the appeal is going to be successful, and then after that they're like, okay, well, we have to have an outcome here, and Glen at that point go, well, we're not replaying it now, because
it's ridiculous. If the appeal is successful, the game has to go ahead. The replay has to go ahead.
You would hope so,
automatically.
But I don't know if I don't know. The rule is.
We're going to make Glen make two decisions.
I still don't understand why the CCCC couldn't just decide, as opposed to having to wait for the. I don't understand why it wasn't in the referee's report. First off, that seemed strange, and then I also don't understand why the CCCC didn't just make a decision immediately, as opposed to leaving it to Glen. Like, is the culture just that we are terrified of making decisions? Is that like? And where does that come from?
Yeah, maybe so. We've been quite poor in the last couple of years. If you look at, like, the swell of public support that was needed for that Liam Miller charity game to be allowed to be moved to Páirc Uí Chaoimh. You look at all the different things. It's at Newbridge or nowhere. It was only when, you know, Cian O'Neill goes to an RTE studio in Cork and makes this plea, and they're saying they're not playing the game, and all of a sudden things start changing, and the GA, who made a statement to say that game will be going ahead, all of a sudden that changes. And you were talking about, you know, what's the reason for the swell of support or the momentum change? Like, this isn't like Jimmy Cooney with Offaly in '98, where everybody knows straight away the game has been blown up early, and Offaly people head onto the pitch and are, you know, not going to leave until they get what they want. This is the sort of thing where, you know, only television viewers probably knew what was going on. People in the stadium wouldn't have really known what was going on at the time, if you get me.
Yeah.
And it's just as time has moved on, then people are realising more and more. Maybe, you, as you said, you take your beating originally, and then it's like, no, come here, this isn't right.
You bring up Offaly Clare, right? If I'm Crokes, I'm looking at Offaly Clare in '97 going, Jesus, lads, no offence here, but I don't think the best team won over those games, Michael. I would say that Clare team was an all-time. It wasn't '97, was it? What year am I?
98.
98, I got the year wrong. Yeah, that was one of the all-time great Clare teams, and I think they left that behind them. But here's the thing: if I'm Crokes, I'm terrified of a replay with the public swell of support, unless I'm the one who goes out with the offer. I'm rallying the troops, and I'm saying, stop drinking. Tuesday club's cancelled. We're training tonight just in case.
There's so many moving parts in this, isn't there? Like, I remember Offaly, there was word came through that there could be a replay on the Monday, and they were going to go training. And I think Johnny Pilkington and a couple were a bit too far gone at that stage to go training that day. But they eventually got back. But look at the public support for Offaly at the time. Like, Offaly, I went to that game in Thurles in '98. Offaly were not going to be beaten that day. No way. By hell or high water, they were not going to be beaten. There was more Offaly people at that game than I remember at any other game. And they just had all the energy. Whereas Clare was like a balloon where you just, you took all the air out of it. And it's probably turning into a similar scenario should there be a replay. I don't know when there's going to be a replay, whether it's going to be next weekend potentially or, 2 weeks' time or whatever. But you would imagine a lot of the momentum is with Glen. You have to think about it from a Kilnocud point of view. You're going in to play another game, but you think you've already won, potentially. You've celebrated it like you've won.
Well, that's why I'd get out in front of that. That's why, apart from I think they should show leadership and say, we know where this is going to go. We can see the writing on the wall. We can see it's unfair, and we can see that we've been, for whatever reason, we have benefited from an unfair advantage, right? If you want to manage that, get out in front of it and say, right, let's get training. Let's take away that moral sense of chip on the shoulder that Glen have. Let's be the ones that offer them the replay, and then the ball is in their court. Like at a strategic level, if you're thinking about it, the ball is in their court, and they can. Oh, we're not. We're just going to take it off you, and then all of a sudden, this whole conversation flips.
Yeah, they shouldn't have to do that. It's the kernel of the point. But I understand where you're coming from. You're obviously looking for some sort of a strategy operations manager thing or something like that. Crisis.
I'm happy here.
How to deal with a crisis. How to come out smelling like roses in a crisis.
Well, I tell you what, Mick, the psychology of a replay will be fascinating. But the fact that we were talking about it earlier, it would set dangerous precedent. Maybe dangerous is too strong a word. A ridiculous precedent, because then all of a sudden you have people like Damian Cassidy, say, preparing his Balahi team to play Glen next year in the Derry Senior Championship, and he can throw on the 16th man with no fear of repercussions or a replay or anything. It would send such a wrong message.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from at that point, and that would be completely nipped in the bud and said, okay, Kilmacud had 16 players on at this time, and they were, they lost an All-Ireland title and were forced to replay the game. And like, if it even entered anybody's head to do it at any stage in a game, it's gone out of your head straight away because you see the repercussions of it. And potentially there could be a replay, there could be a fine, there could be several things in this depending on what's going to happen. But it's definitely a story that's going to rumble on for another while.
Well, certainly, I thought that the view in Glen, coming from the Irish News early yesterday, was that, look, they were just going to let it go. But it seems like, from what Damian Cassidy was saying, that they've changed their minds, that they've been listening to people saying it's not fair, 16 versus 15 is just not fair, and like, look, so it feels now, from what he's saying, that an appeal is more likely than not.
Yeah, that's what it looks like at the moment. Anyway, I would have said it's the percentage chance of an appeal coming, I think, is increasing as every hour passes by.
I like to think of Conor Glass and the lads currently doing laps around the pitch somewhere. They're off the drink already. They're already training for it.
They're purging.
Laps around a bar, I'd say, more like it, Shane.
Possibly, yeah. Maybe it's better that it's weekend after this one if there is a replay.
Michael, good stuff.
I think so.
Thanks a million.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a million, folks.
Michael Verney there.